Kia ora, koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to the Regulatory and Compliance Committee meeting at Far North District Council. I'm Kelly Stratford and I'm going to open us up with a koukia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E he aki ana te atukura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. And before I welcome everybody to do a quick whakapanogatanga, just a reminder for those that aren't speaking, please mute yourself so that there is no extra noise. And if we can try and keep our paper rustling and side conversations to a null or minimum, because it'll pick up all the sound and go over the top of our committee members on Teams. Okay, so let's start with who's at the end of the table. Just your title.
Kia ora, my name's Rochelle Dean. I'm Manager of Environmental Services.
Thank you.
Kia ora, my name is Greg Wilson. I'm Manager of District Planning.
Kia ora, Linda Ward. I'm Chair of the Vale Island Sonora Community Board and I sit on this committee and compliance.
Kia ora, my name is Dean Myberg. I'm the Joint Manager District Services.
Tēnā koutou katoa, Malima Baker, Democracy Services Advisor.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko Rachel Smith Pokuingoa. I am the Chair of the Strategy and Policy Committee.
Kia ora, Roger Eckers, Manager of Climate Change.
Thank you. And our Deputy Chair, Dave Collard.
Yeah, kia ora, it's Dave Collard, Councillor for Te Hiku for at least another 33 days and hoping for more.
Thank you. Councillor Vucic.
Yeah, Atamare, Mike, John Vucic, local councillor here, and welcome aboard. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least at all, Mike.
Atamari mō rena kia koutou. Hoi no, ka tikina atu au ki roto I te wāhi ngaro. A tātou nei tini mate ko nunumi ki te pō. Aku whakaro ki roto I a Ngāti Kuri I tēnei wā. Tērā puna mātauranga, tērā kaumātua, Hirini Waitai. Ngā whakaro ki roto I te hāpua, me te whānau Waitai. Hoki mai kia tātou. Tēnā koutou katoa e te tēpu. Koutou hoki ko hono mai ki runga ki tēnei. Ko mai te wake tēnei. He uri a hau no roto mai panguru, hukianga. Noho anau ki roto ataipara. Mahi ana mo te runanga o te raro. E hikaka ana te manoa, te noho pēnei. So good morning everyone, Mike te wake. Up here with Dave in the rough weather outside, so if you have trouble hearing, because I'm having trouble hearing you guys, it's because of the rough weather outside, and I'm glad we never made the trip this morning, Dave, so kia ora tātou.
Okay, so we are moving through. Our first item on our agenda is item 4.1. Confirmation of our previous minutes. Oh, sorry, I forgot that we have some apologies. Ngā I have apologies from our Mayor and Deputy Mayor this morning. Thank you very much.
Happy to move those, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Belinda second. Thank you, Member Ward. So now we're on to confirmation of previous minutes.
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Awesome. So Councillor Smith is moving that the Regulatory Compliance Committee confirms that the minutes of the meeting of the committee held 7th of June 2022 are true and correct record. Seconder?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see you trying to put the machine. Awesome. Anybody need to speak to those or raise any issues on those minutes? Colette? Right, all those in favour? Aye. Aye.
Right.
Okay, item 5.1, parking enforcement. and Rochelle is going to do a presentation on this, but we'll move and second it first. That the Regulatory Compliance Committee recommend that Council continue the trial period of enforcing stationary vehicle warrants of fitness and registration offences across the district for a further 12 months to 30 June 2023. Thank you, Member Ward. And are you back got the
Resolution on screen?
no. So let me just see what that message actually.
That's the agenda.
Oh yeah. Is Casey able to do that for you? Put the agenda up, the resolutions as we go?
I can do both.
Okay, sorry.
So you'd like to see the resolution online?
Yeah.
On screen?
Yeah, I'm just coming back to the recommendation. I've read it out. And Member, did you move it? Yeah, awesome. And Councillor Smith, you're going to second it. Give on the table. And Rochelle, did you wish to take this as read, or were you going to have a call it all?
Marlene, I have those slides in the first one.
One moment. Is it the right one, Rochelle?
Yes. So I do take the report as being read, but I was just going to summarise. So the Warrant of Fitness and Registration Trial at the May Regulatory and Compliance Committee last year, it was approved to trial the enforcement of stationary warrant of fitness and registration offences across Far North District for a period of 12 months. So the trial commenced on the 1st of July last year, but due to COVID lockdowns, Waka Kotahi suspended the warrant of fitness and registration trial until the having to renew registrations to the end of November 2021. So Parking Warden didn't start issuing infringement notices until December of that year. So we did 2 months of advertising flyers in the main towns, and that was Kaitaia, Kaikohe, Kirikiri and Paihia. During the COVID lockdown, obviously the Parking Warden was unable to go out, but there's also right up to sort of the orange setting, the Parking Warden noted a significant decrease in the vehicles that were actually coming through to the CBD. More people were just working from home or not coming into town at all, maybe just going to supermarkets, but anything like that. So from December, there were 121 infringements issued, and those were vehicles not displaying current warrant of fitness for a period of from 6 months or more. So we came in with a softly approach. And during that time, there were 19 notices. On the next slide, Malima, they have that. 19 notices have been waived due to the owner complying with updating their warrant of fitness, which is what we were hoping for. 10 infringements were paid, and then there were some notices that were waived due to unconfirmed ownership and motor check, administration error, and some with return mail. We have continued within July and August, and there has been an additional 35 infringements issued during that period, and with those another 11 have been waived by people complying and 8 more paid. So to get a clear indication for the requirement of warrant of fitness and vehicle registration enforcement across the district, it's recommended to extend the trial for a further year up until the end of June 2023 to get a full picture of whether or not it's needed within the district, whether or not it's something that we need in the district, and also for us to measure. At the moment, as I said, we're only measuring warrant of fitnesses over 6 months, and sort of bringing in the registration of vehicles as well. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Rochelle. I've got one hand up over here. Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Rochelle, thank you for that. My question, or perhaps my concern, is around the resourcing side of things, and I have a concern that as we add more to our delegation, and I have a similar question around the report that we're receiving at Stratham Poll tomorrow around parking on state highways too. We're stretching our very, very, very limited resource even further, and I'm aware that our communities are making sacrifices because of that in terms of enforcement, especially on disability parking, but on parking in general. So I guess my concern comes from the fact that we are loading more workload onto a resource that we're not expanding, and we're not looking to expand either. I note that Waka Kotahi have a partnership program, a road safety partnership program, and my question is around whether or not we've pursued partnership opportunities to increase our resource so that our ratepayer is benefiting from these additional services but not having to make sacrifices, because we are picking up the tab for another agency, so it's only fair that we ask them to come to the party. Have we had those conversations?
Madam Chair, no, we haven't had any conversations in regards to partnerships at the moment. Our one parking warden is really just doing this in their normal beat, so to speak, so sort of not just focusing on this. It's really just, when they're based in Kirikiri or Kaitaia, they take into account and are checking warrant of fitnesses and everything like that. So the disability car parks are still monitored and the time parking is still monitored as it was. This is just an addition, but I guess it would slow them down, and a partnership would be a great idea, but we haven't had those conversations yet.
Is there a mechanism that we can support you to have those conversations? What would that look like?
I guess first off I'd need to make contact with Waka Kotahi to see what that looks like, and I don't have that information at the moment, so it would be something that I'd need to bring back to the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, I think that's a great idea. We've held off doing that, looking to the trial as a basis for a good conversation, a constructive conversation around how we want to work with others. We were hoping that following the trial, not that this is a revenue generating exercise, we really have emphasised all along that it is all about road safety. And the responses, interestingly, have been quite mixed. Some people have thanked us for the reminders because they've had 28 days, and then if they comply, there's a waiver. Others have reacted differently and really enjoyed the experience of being, at the receiving end of these kinds of notices. But in time, along with the partnering idea, we would have hoped to have positioned it so that we, with extra revenue, that we could fund further resources. So it becomes a self-funding operation. And again, I want to emphasise it's not about us being police out there. It is about road safety primarily, but it is an opportunity to actually also see how we can expand our resource because we are struggling. It's a large district and we don't have parking wardens, plural, to deal with that. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Magu. Madam Chair, perhaps if I could ask if there would be possibility of making a note attached to this resolution to just request that partnership opportunities with Kotahi be pursued and reported back to the committee. I'm aware that tomorrow with the amendment to the parking bylaw, we won't be looking to add, well, the recommendation is not to add Opanoni, for example, simply because we don't have the resource to be able to do that. So in the interest of working smarter, not harder, I think that there's a really good opportunity here. So if we could pop a note in, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Rochelle.
Thanks for that, Councillor Smith. Next, I've got hands up from Councillor Collard.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. My question was probably very much around what Rachel has just said. But the observation that I make is that it's not just about having a look at a car and determining whether it's got a warrant and or registration. Once that's determined, there's a ticket written, and then you just went through a whole list of things, of scenarios with what results from that, when they're paid and who didn't no address, all that sort of thing. It all takes time. So the resource needs to be, the the work needs to be resourced because we're really, it appears to me, just picking up the buck for Wellington.
Thank you for that, Councillor Collard. What I've picked up from what you said, which I think the room was struggling to hear, and we've got the volume up in here as loud as it will go. So perhaps if you speak closer to your device, you've got perhaps the rain drowning you out. But yes, you're concerned that we're picking up the tab for central government around this, WAFs and regos, enforcement around that. So what would you like to see done?
I would certainly like to see some sort of contribution from the government towards these resources. There's all sorts of things being loaded onto council from Wellington with no consideration, it would appear, for our own labour force. You know, if I get any closer to this thing, I'll be in it.
Thank you. So the concern is that we're using our resource, rather than going around monitoring our mobility spaces. And
I think, Madam Chair, as Rochelle pointed out, this is part of normal duties, and the monitoring is picked up along the way. So with the partnering idea and also the success or otherwise of the trial, the extended trial, we'd be looking to possibly increase our resource based on whatever revenue scenario emerges. So if that supports the suggestion of another parking warden resource, then that may assist us. On the other hand, if the trial is deemed to be unsuccessful or not worth progressing with, then we would have a different discussion around not pursuing that and just reverting to our normal parking arrangements.
Thank you for that, Dr. Dean. I've next got Councillor Vucic. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Similar to what Councillor Collard was saying, I hope you can hear me above all the noise you're experiencing there. I notice on page 17, for example, some of the feedback which you have mentioned was mixed, from outrage, saying that it was just revenue gathering, and we're hearing from Dr. Dean that that's not the case. But I do recall that the Community Board were struggling to get parking enforcers to come to Kaiko as an example, and they said they weren't doing that. But obviously looking at the stats, they are doing that now because of the warrant. So can you please explain what changes may have occurred? Because I do know that was community boards were, especially about the policing of mobility car parks, which were not being policed, and we got told it was only the high parking stress areas, Kirikiri and Paihia, where that was being done.
Madam Chair, the trial with the flyers was pushed out into Kaikoui to give the reminders or letting people know that we were going to be looking at doing warrant of fitness and registration. Because we still haven't got that Kaikoui was state highway, and so we are still continuing only with the main centres where we always were with warrant of fitness and registration. And once the new parking bylaw comes through, then we will be able to start with the new delegations for state highways.
Thank you for that, Rochelle.
Supplementary quick question to that then.
Hang on, just one moment. Can I just keep the questions around the registrations and warrant of fitness enforcement? This paper doesn't speak to any of the other parking issues. Thank you, Councillor Vucic.
So then it is okay. So so I was hoping that we get the parking is included as that, as Dr. Dean said, as part of the regular work they were doing. They were doing this as well, but it appears not to be the case that they are doing this just to give a reminder to people, which I'm actually for. We can't afford to have unwarranted registered vehicles on the road. Thank you. That's my question. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Councillor Vucic. And welcome, Councillor Clendon. I'm sorry you missed introducing yourself at the beginning of the meeting. But we do have Councillor Clendon online and he has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I have been here since the beginning, in fact, but that's fine. Everybody knows me, I think, so that's fine. Yeah, I take a slightly different tack on this, it seems. I wonder why we don't go straight to what's described in the paper as option 2, which is discontinue the trial and simply include WAF and rego enforcement as business as usual. To me, there's a proven need. I mean, the numbers do speak for themselves a bit. Something like 5% vehicles without not displaying a current warrant. That's one vehicle out of every 20, and quite a significantly higher number unregistered. Personally, I'm less bothered about unregistered vehicles. That's central government's problem, though of course it does affect our roading funding. But in terms of the warrants, if one vehicle in 20 is unsafe, then that's a real problem for our community. You know, look outside, our roads are not good. We get a lot of wet weather. If people's brakes and tyres aren't up to scratch, then that's an accident waiting to happen. So personally, I'd rather see us cut to the chase and just accept that this henceforth is part of business as usual. I don't see that it imposes a lot of extra cost. Our gentleman is out there every day anyway, and he just simply would be looking for 2 more things other than just parking. Obviously, people who get ticketed are not going to like it any more than people like getting parking tickets. But I think the approach taken to say that, well, yes, get your car up to scratch within a defined time, the ticket gets waived, it's a fairly, I think it's quite a soft approach and a realistic one. So personally, I'd favour this option too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Clendon. Before you...
Madam Chair, just a point of clarity.
Sorry. Member Ward had her hand up before as well.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you for this report, Rochelle. And I'm just focusing on the initiative, which is Safer Roads. And I think bearing in mind that we haven't really had a good fair trial period, and taking on board what Councillor Clendon has just pointed out, I'm wondering if more of a 6-month period leading into the summer would get the word and spread the word out there in our communities. I'm totally in support of this, and I think it's great to read that we capture more unlicensed vehicles. I have with it is that it does target Kirikiri Paihia, which I think is a good thing because we're too Kirikiri's a service centre, whereas Paihia's a visitor centre. And I think once we get that strategy and policy item through in relation to be able to charge on State Highway 11 in particular, that will free up parks and it will make, you know, for a safer environment, particularly when most of that parking is in a 50k zone, and that's also under review to be reduced along with the speed reviews coming up. So I think it's, if the aim is to make our communities safer, I think we should continue with this. So whether we go straight into it or whether we reduce the trial period is up for question, but it's being self-funded. I think once we get moving with it and have the ability to actually ticket right along Marsden Road in particular, I think it should be self-funding. The parking wardens are walking that way anyway, so it would just be, it wouldn't be necessarily added to the workload. It's something they just do naturally, looking at the vehicles and the conditions of them. So people are travelling in our areas, they're coming in, and if they're travelling into the beaches and things in unsafe vehicles, I think we need to be capturing those markets. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Member Ward. And were there any other questions, or do I have a... I've just got a couple of comments myself to make whilst something else is building in the background. We did have a couple of conversations. So we had He Iwi Kotahi Tātou Trust come and speak to the committee, and we also had offline a conversation with, was it Tony Hill, who both expressed their displeasure. There was also community members who expressed their displeasure about this, and whilst the report says, you know, most of the infringements were in Kirikiri, as Member Ward has said, Kirikiri is a service town, and you know, many around this table would argue Kirikiri is a service town for the district. So you know, there's no knowing what you know, who what pockets, what demographic have been impacted by those infringements. So I think that the resolution as it stands is a good one, and I would really like to, more than what it says now, add that conversations towards partnership with the Northland Safer Roads are progressed.
Or that, Madam Chair, that
Waka
options
Kotahi,
be explored or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Waka Kotahi actually invests money in Northland that are interested in doing whatever we can.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know how everyone else feels about that addition to the resolution, but should I tidy it up?
Madam Chair, my concern would be that we would be restricting ourselves to Northland Safer Roads. That would be the only thing. If we're to be specific, I would be concerned that in terms of opportunities to be explored, there may be others out there. So I guess that would be my only concern that I've raised.
Yeah, the reason I suggested Northland Safer Roads is because they actually have, under their umbrella, they've got, there's a group in Te Huku, there's a group in Kyle, through the trust there, Whangaroa, and Moeroa. So they're all groups that are involved in and actually get funding towards improving road safety. It's in their mandate. Yeah.
Would that be restricting us from pursuing partnerships directly with Waka Kotahi though, through our regional land transport plans and things?
They sit at the table of Northland Safer Roads. Okay. Yep. Well,
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Could you just explain a little more exactly how engaging with these programs would increase the number of safe and registered vehicles? I'm not seeing a connection between those programs and getting people to get their cars warranted and registered.
So at the moment, for example, Iwi Kotahi Tātou Trust are part of the driver licensing training program, and when they have vehicles coming in that are out of warrant or not registered, they teach their participants, they have a dialogue, and they also send them to MSD to get some assistance to get their cars roadworthy before they can actually get their licence. That's one example. And another thing that Naho talked to the committee about, Naho from Iwi Kotahi Tātou Trust talked to the committee about, was starting up some courses to teach people actually how to maintain their vehicle, how to change their light bulbs and their headlights and stuff like that. So it's before the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, Councillor Clendon. But sorry, I've got a question from Mike Tiwaki before we continue.
Kia ora, a question. Is it considered that, especially for Kaitaia, a place like this, our four mechanics have a big backlog of work? So even scheduling in for warrant of fitness is just getting, it's still, it takes up a lot of time. I've had to go to Warkworth to get mine, one of my vehicles warranted. So just thought if that was considered.
Madam Chair, that's the reason why we have been targeting vehicles that are past the 6 months that their warrants have already passed, because we feel that that's quite a good time that they've had the opportunity to book in or to get their vehicles fixed within that 6 month period. So we've seen that as being a fair time.
Thank you. Okay, progress on this? Yes,
Thanks, Madam Chair. Rochelle, do you know, I think there's some sort of bleed in time if you actually booked in for your warrant of fitness. So long as you were actually booked in to have your car done, you're allowed to continue to drive. Is that correct? Or what sort of lead in time is there if there is a difficulty with getting appointments?
Madam Chair, it's my understanding that if your vehicle isn't warranted, you are only able to drive that vehicle for the purpose of actually getting it fixed, or going and getting the warrant if it's already gone past the date.
Madam Chair, if you did want to add to the recommendation, I think Malina started something about that opportunities be pursued, or similar words, to address
with
both this
road safety parties.
Safety, yes, and then also resourcing. Maybe the word resourcing could be in there, because the purpose of us doing the trial and coming back to a committee of the next council would be to report back on the success or otherwise of the trial, but also to address those issues which we spoke about earlier, where we want to reposition things so that we're not struggling the way we are at the moment. So if those opportunities are pursued around road safety and resourcing, then that broadens it to multiple organisations and brings it back to the resourcing issue that we are having at the moment.
Resourcing issues. So, and the opportunities to be pursued with road safety parties and resourcing issues are
well, that opportunities to be
explored.
Pursued to address road safety issues and road safety and resourcing issues. So that's a broad brush.
And the opportunities be pursued to address road safety and
resourcing issues.
Okay. I'm just happy with that amendment. Councillor Smith is the seconder. You comfortable with that?
Yeah, if I was to overthink it, I'd say partnership opportunities, but I'll avoid that, so I'm happy with that. Thank you.
We could add partnership.
I think it just gives a clearer direction, Madam Chair.
Linda?
Yep.
Add partnership or no? Yep. Okay. Done. All right. So I am. Does anybody want to speak to that amendment, or I'm putting the resolution to the vote? Can't see any hands. Okay. Can we have vote by division? Sorry, Malima, because most of the is online. Sorry. Thank you. So we've got Councillor Collard.
Yeah, in favour.
Councillor Glendon.
I'll abstain.
Councillor Smith.
Support.
Councillor Vusic.
Aye. Yeah.
Member Ward and Member Te Wake.
Aye.
Great, and I was in favour as well. Okay. Right, next item. Oh, this is the good one. Oh, they're all good. Sorry, Rochelle.
Greg the rock star just coming in.
Sorry. Okay, so item 5.2, expressions of interest for independent hearings commissioners. So we have a quite long resolution here. We'll quickly read it out. That pursuant Section 34A1 of the Resource Management Act 1991, Council delegates the following powers to the persons listed in the attached schedule of commissioners with making good decision certification, Appendix 1. The powers to A, hear and determine resource consent applications, including but not limited to a change or cancellation of conditions, determinations for the requirement for a hearing, and extending or waiving compliance with a time limit up to the maximum period specified by the Act. The power to decline processing of an application or the consideration of a submission, determining that the Environment Court decide an application for resource consent and directing an applicant or submitter to provide briefs of evidence, further information prior to hearing. Notices of requirement and objections under sections 357, 357A and 357B of the Act. B, extend or confirm existing use rights. C, determine what inactivity is permitted, or that inactivity is permitted. D, make recommendations on public and private plan changes. And E, make recommendations to amend a plan or proposed plan to remove duplication or conflict with a national environmental standard. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Okay, thank you very much. And members, questions? We have got Greg Wilson from our district plan team in the room, planning team, I should say. And no hands up.
Did Greg want to speak to the report?
Oh.
Did you want to take the paper as read, or do you have a statement to make? Greg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors and staff. Thank you for the ability to present this paper to the Regulatory Committee today. It is an opportunity that has been perhaps been waiting for some time, so it's important that we have had this chance to seek an update of the list of commissioners that are available for statutory processes for both consenting, district services methods, and for plan making. And so you'll see that the item is accompanied by an attachment with an updated list of commissioners, all of which have met the test, if you like, of completing the Making Good Decisions course, which is basically the eligibility criteria. And so this is an opportunity to bring to council new providers with suitable experience across a broad range of criteria, and so it allows council's processes to target where those skills are required for different statutory processes. And so it may mean that we may need to augment this list for different processes, perhaps in the next council term, if we find that there is a type of gap in the spectrum of the services that we're trying to fill. So there is a good broad selection of capabilities. Perhaps from a purely district plan perspective, there may be some further opportunity to augment with Kaupapa Māori skills for plan making purposes, which is also a consideration of Section 34A. So that's perhaps just something to highlight. This is an opportunity to bring on board a much broader set of skills and experience. 7 providers who are on the current list are on the proposed list, so there's a carry through of people that council are already familiar with. But there's also some space in the next council to consider if there's any further need to augment the spectrum of skills available. Thank you. I'd be happy to field any questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Greg. I've got a question from Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Greg, and congrats on this report. 11 years, so it's nice to see it in front of us. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. You've already picked up on some of my concerns. I did have to Google the meaning of augment in this context, though, and I think we're on the same path. So my concern really came with whether or not this list is fit for purpose for the next 5 years, given the space that we're going into, given the fact that as a council we've acknowledged that we want to resource mana whenua to be able to participate in these processes, which we haven't yet been able to do, and knowing the element of change that we'll be facing over the next couple of years. So my question was around how we could be more agile with that list, and I'm not sure whether you're confident that the resolution in front of us will give opportunity for that to come back, or whether there needs to be a recommendation from the committee to review that list perhaps in 12 months or something. I'd be more than happy to take your guidance on that. But It just felt like there were gaps, especially in the Māoritanga side of things, given the number of hearings that we should anticipate to hear over the next 5 years. So my question was around how we can take this as a foundation, but give opportunity to build on it.
Thank you, through the chair. Can I just also acknowledge your feedback and just acknowledge the work that Liz Searle has done with this report, and Teresa Burkhardt, and also the fact that we've worked with other parts of the organisation, so with Rochelle and team members with Rochelle's District Services team, to make sure that we've got a fit for purpose approach. And being fit for purpose is a good theme. I think you've hit on an issue that may require some further strategic consideration. When we look across the list, there is representation of Kaupapa Māori capabilities, but I think there's also a need for perhaps inviting others to the table with that skill set and experience. And so there is an exercise being led by Tohono to actually initiate some making good decision course opportunities, and that's something we're suggesting could be perhaps a bit more broader, especially with some of the strategic relationships that we're currently developing. It should be perhaps broader whilst being also targeted at the same time. So there is an opportunity to further augment that list before we select a hearings panel for the district plan hearings. So in our thinking, there is time to do that, but it may be also strategic to say maybe an extra provision in the resolution to undertake a review of that list within 3 months, perhaps.
I'd be happy with that, Madam Chair. Thank you, Greg. That's helpful.
And I have Councillor Collard wanted to ask a question while you're crafting that addition. Councillor Collard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My first question has been answered. Perhaps mine wouldn't have been quite so eloquent as what Rachel's was, but it was more about
the flexibility. Can you talk into your device, Dave? Go a bit closer.
If I get any closer, I'll be sticking my head out through your screen. My concern was about that flexibility to add names or people to the list as required. That has been answered. But the second part of my question was to put in perspective, during the course of a year, how many of these hearings do we have where we need to use these people? Or employ these people?
Are you able to answer that, Rochelle or Greg?
Thank you. I can answer it from a district plan perspective. And we've administered 20 plan changes since the plan was made fully operative. And I think we've used about an estimate of 8 different commissioners around that field during that process for that plan making, 20 different plan making processes. And to be honest, I think there was one commissioner who was more steadily represented through our plan making, and that provider is also on the list as well. So that person is also on the list as well. So they're quite familiar with council's processes. But from a district services perspective, perhaps Rochelle might go.
Through the chair, so our number of appeals and hearings does, is different each year depending on what is coming up. I think in the last year we've had about 4, and we have used probably around 3 different commissioners within that period of time. One was a joint one with NRC where we did bring on another commissioner because it was the same. And we have been using commissioners in different capacities, and even, have been doing some processing work of very complex applications that we will use different.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Collard. I can't see anyone else with their hand up in the sky, but I've got Member Ward.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Greg, my question's around in relation to the resource consent applications and seeing and bearing in mind what we're already experiencing at community board level with focus on our waterways and that massive coastline I'm looking at behind you with our lakes and rivers and streams. Do we have a prioritised list of, I see one or two people are skilled in that area of water, and we have that crossover constantly of where land meets sea and, you know, whenua meets wai. So my question really is, have you prioritised specific areas in the proposed district plan that are going to require a lot more skill sets and resourcing with this whole sensitivity issue around climate change, potable water, all these issues? I have read some of the skills, yes, people that specialise, but I just wonder from that selection process whether you've actually prioritised a change in skill set moving forward as to where we might need to be more heavily resourced.
Thank you for that question. It's a really good one in terms of how we provide efficient and effective services to address each of the different types of statutory processes. So from a resource consent perspective, I'm going into your territory, Michelle, but sometimes we might have a joint hearing where regional council and district councils are represented, and therefore you might have a panel that includes a skill set that can service the ecological issues and the regional council functions. That also traverses into district council territory as well. So that kind of concept will carry through for consenting processes. For plan-making processes, there's a list of the types of capabilities that we have tried to address. And there could be some further strengthening potential around the ecological capabilities, especially with our biodiversity issues that we have with our district. So I guess that the canvassing exercise of inviting commissioners has been quite broad and open. We can be strategic if we seek to target other expertise. So so we need to make sure we can get the right team available to meet each type of issue. And from a plan making perspective, there's a good spread there. There may be an opportunity to further strengthen if we think that's necessary. And from a consenting exercise, the list appears to be able to service those issues, but could be equally enhanced if we were to seek further targeting of particular issues, perhaps around ecological.
Thank you for that, Member Ward. I've got Member Te Wate.
Tēnā koe te hea mana. Otira kia koutou mahi au ēnei mahi mō ngā taumaha ki Murira. Hei tikina atu ngā pūkenga o te Māori e ona mātauranga Māori. So thank you, Madam Chair. But I'd just like to acknowledge the work that everyone has done to try and put some mātauranga Māori into spaces like this. I think as grateful as I am, it's just that with the amount of skill sets that person and going on to a list is that we have to be very careful as well. So I'm talking about not being in on the map as someone who can cover for all of Hokianga or all of Kaikohe, is that you got to go down and refine it more into like hapu level, because I know for a fact if someone in Muri Whenua was to say something for Hokianga, that wouldn't go down very well. So there's also those types of things that need to be considered as well. Maybe having a list of tohunga with these skill sets or the appropriate people, but from maybe a bigger pool of looking into. So e mihi ana. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Mike. Thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to move a slight amendment to the resolution, and I've taken on board Greg's comments. So it simply is F, that the list be reviewed within 6 months. I've taken on board Greg's recommendation of 3, but I'm mindful that it's September, that we have an election and we have Christmas. So I thought that Greg and the team will get it done when they need to get it done, but I just thought that it would be important that we're more generous with our time to take that into account. So I'd just like to add that amendment to the resolution, please.
Member Ward, are you happy with that? Awesome. Okay. I just had a question on this before we move the vote on the item, and I note that there's no other hands up as yet, but coming back to the commissioners that are being carried through, or however many has been carried through from the last pool of, like, was it 20 years ago? How will the selection process work? In other councils, they have a running list where they, right, those ones have been done, go, you know, they select through, so take the first 3 from the top of the list. It's not the same commissioner for every application, so that you're building up experience and expertise for everyone in the pool. So I just wanted to check how will Rochelle's team, for example, allocate as you need, Commissioner?
Madam Chair, a lot of the time when we're asking commissioners around who is available at the time as well, in order to take that on, so that is taken into account, and then really looking at the experience within the area that the hearing is required on. But I certainly take on board and making sure that when we've got this list, that we do ensure that, you know, in order to get that experience, they need to do the mahi. So.
And it is an operational thing for you guys to manage, but good practice is rotation in the sector. Yeah, so not the same commissioner every application. Any other comments or questions? Committee? Okay. Oh, yes, Member Ward?
Yeah, I just had a question for Greg. When it comes to resourcing, why have you put, or why do we have location on the list? Does that sway the selection? Like if you're in Whangarei, it's cheaper and easier, and you might know the farmers better, bearing in mind we're moving into a lot of change and a new plan, whereas you've got people new from Timaru and Auckland, might be a lot more expensive to bring them up, but they may relate more to the rural mindset and probably been thinking of our area rather than the city-centric, highly qualified people.
Again, very good question. If I could suggest, it's about creating the right team approach. It's focused on the issues that you're trying to address. So apart from location that person might reside or have experience in, it's experience against different resource management topics or issues, the currency of that experience. Its applicability to our situation, but also, there is also a need for local knowledge to also be brought into play. And so, where appropriate, we should be bringing in that local knowledge, but also ensuring that there is the appropriate skill set focused on the issues. For example, with the proposed district plan, it will be a very careful crafting of the spectrum of team members to address the things that you've just identified, but ensuring there's also skills and experience to be able to carry through such a large volume of work, a large volume of report writing, so it's understandings associated with those types of practices. And also a spread of topic issues across the whole district as a consolidated review. It's very expansive. So have we got people who have experience in multiple factors, multiple criteria that we can get efficiency from that provider? once again, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. I think this one will be okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? You want to take division, Madam Chair? Okay. Councillor Collard, you in favour?
Yeah, in favour.
Councillor Cleveland?
In favour.
Councillor Smith? Support. Busich?
Aye.
Board? Support. Te Waki?
Aye.
Kia ora, and I'm in favour too. Right, okay, moving on to item 6.1, the draft regulatory compliance work program. The recommendation is that the Regulatory Compliance Committee receive the report draft regulatory compliance work program for further consideration as part of council and committee arrangements by the incoming council. So, any comments on this? I can start. Oh, first. Member Ward. I'll second. Anyone online have any questions or comments? Any additions you wish to make?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just wanted to, can you hear me clearly?
No, I don't know what it is. Is it rain in the background?
Not here, there's no noise at all, it's quiet as. Probably rain affecting the transmission, there's raining quite heavy. But what I wanted to ask a question about, on page 43, the looking at environmental management, food licensing, when they say quarterly report on food licensing, how many premises are registered, does that include all of the food vans, etc., in the areas?
Great question.
Or just premises?
Where do we pick up the food,
It's in the
hawkers?
in the middle of the page. I can't see it.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Rochelle's going to answer that for you.
Madam Chair, that comes through in the bylaw update, because it's under the road user bylaw, so mobile shops and things like that comes through under those. So if they've got a food or alcohol component of them.
And where
we can bring them through into under the food and alcohol reports if that's what would be preferred.
I think we have had them in the past, in the last couple of years. I'm sure we had some travelling ones in there.
It's brought in alfresco licensing and underneath the food as well. And so we can bring the mobile food to that as well. That's what's preferred.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Did anybody else have any questions on the work program?
No, Madam Chair, just a typo in on page 43 under the bylaws. The breaches should be breaches. Someone was obviously dreaming when they wrote it.
Where does it? Which item?
Second to bottom box on page 43.
Yeah. Yep.
My apologies, yeah, we didn't make that.
It's all right.
That might be me.
We're going to dream.
Dream features. Councillor Smith, or I can go first.
Thank you.
Okay. What I've really wanted to have happen with this committee is a little more collab with the other committees. And look, we've got Greg here today. Regularly, colleagues have asked me, where is the wastewater compliance for this committee, and it hasn't sat here, and it has appeared in our infrastructure, the big monthly report. But what I would like to recommend to the future council is that regulatory and compliance has oversight over whether wastewater is compliant, what are the issues, so that we can, as a committee, interrogate that with a compliance lens. Because I don't see regulatory and compliance as, checking up on the public. I think it's also our, council as an organisation, whether it is where it sits in the regulatory framework and how compliant council is being. So, I did mention that in the agenda preview. Sorry, Jean. Didn't give you a heads up.
That's a good point, Madam Chair. It is regulatory under the broad regulatory umbrella, so it should logically fit with the committee named regulatory. So.
Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and absolutely support what you've just raised. And the example of any abatement notices is probably a really good one, where there should be opportunity for that to be more heavily scrutinised at a committee level, and regulatory compliance seems bog standard. So if you're looking for any kind of amendment, I'm happy to second that, or if it's quite happy to just be a note, then I'll also support that. My question was just around, I guess in a similar vein to what you've just raised, and learning from where we've come from our bylaws and policies space. Just looking for some assurance that within this work program we'll be monitoring the, I guess, the effectiveness, but also the review processes and review timeframes that need to happen and sit against those, whether that's more logical to sit here or happy to take advice as to whether that needs to sit somewhere else. But I think going forward, it's really important that our council somewhere monitors the review timeframes of our bylaws and our policies, as well as the implementation of those, so that we're aware of parking being a prime example. If we've set some rules in place and then we're not able to enforce those, just to be able to generate those conversations. So I just wanted to put that on the table also. Madam Chair, we may have already captured it. It was just a gap that I felt was missing at the moment.
Anybody wish to respond?
Madam Chair.
Councillor Vucic, yes?
Yep, put my hand up. I think this what you raised, turn my camera on, what you raised is a good point, and there seems to be a bit across the different committees, a little bit of confusion. And definitely I'd recommend, if you're going to say, look, let's look at this in the new training, which is where we can only do it at this stage, I'd 100% support that. What my concern is the good definitions of what the role of the regulatory committee is, and monitoring as well. Like if you're looking at roading infrastructure, you are monitoring that function, ensuring that we're working and targeting, and it's defining those roles. I think is what is really defined, is required here in the regulatory, where you're looking at more of a governance oversight and overview in terms of the regulations and changing maybe how you're looking at that. It's just how you fit those together. You correctly raised, shall I say, that there is a overlap with infrastructure, with wastewater compliance, and that I think is a bit of work in program that needs to go forward in defining it clearly, and that's where the problem lies.
Councillor Research. So in the terms of reference, when we first created these, we did include ensuring council's planning and regulatory functions comply with legislative requirements, and then we got more specific, ensure that consents associated with council's infrastructure are being met and renewals are being planned for. So it's just been an operational issue. Why they haven't come here. We have sought for them to come here.
So, Madam Chair, I think moving forward, and whatever those new arrangements are under the new council committee structure, I've made some notes. It does highlight the need for a more aligned and integrated approach under a regulatory or regulation umbrella, if you like. So it's something we can address, and hence the recommendation to bring it here today to receive the report, but for a review, because at this stage we don't know what that committee structure might look like. If it's the same committee structure, then certainly the points raised today we can incorporate into future regulatory and compliance reporting.
Councillor Smith, did you want to put what you were wanting to address into?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm hesitant to, because of our desire to take a more integrated approach, I'm hesitant to put that into a box, and perhaps just flagging it today as something that we haven't done across all of our committees is probably sufficient for going forward. And perhaps just hope that one of us around the table is here post 8th of October to ensure that we are filling that gap. I think that from a Chair of Stratton Poll committee point of view, knowing that tomorrow is our first proactive strategy that we need to consider for the term, because we've been spending the term playing catch up, how do we learn from that and ensure that it doesn't happen again, I guess is my more outcome-based question. So just tabling it today, happy not to put it with any kind of resolution.
And how do the committee feel about this being a report that the committee receives rather than recommends to the incoming council?
Can we turn that on its head and ask you how you feel, Madam Chair?
How does that make me feel? Well, receiving the report at the end of a triennium, you know, I don't feel it really has a solid outcome, because you just don't know what's going to happen. I feel if we change this to a recommendation, at least it would be something that the new triennium could mull over February next year, and they're deciding what they're going to, you know, when they're deciding what they need to have oversight of.
Obviously just put in your mother's head.
I'll just say, Madam Chair, it does say receive the report for further consideration.
How do we make sure that that consideration as part of council and committee arrangements is?
Because say the mechanism is explained with the new council, so it comes back to detail.
Oh, Maria.
I've got Councillor Clinton that wants to speak next.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think receive is sufficient, to be honest. We can't determine what the next council chooses to do. I would certainly hope that the new council goes in with a clean slate and says, yeah, what committees do we want? What's the best structure? I think of infrastructure committee, given that a great, large portion of council's infrastructure will no longer be a council concern with Three Waters disappearing. It's a very new environment that the new council will walk into. I wish them luck with that. But seriously, I do think that we can expect that there will be common sense and understanding around the new council table for them to have a clean slate approach to the committee structure, to think what's necessary, what functions need to be performed, and what form will best serve those functions. I don't think we can or indeed should try to determine too much in advance of that council coming in. I think we can anticipate there'll be at least some carryover from this council into the next. Maybe not much, who knows, but certainly there'll be a level of experience and continuity as well as through the staff. So, yeah, I think we can tie ourselves in knots trying to anticipate what the next council might think. But I think, for me, the clear message that needs to come from this council to the next is that they should think very hard about what is the context is going to be so very different to what we've had in this last three. That's all. Thank you.
Wisdom and reason, Councillor Clinton. Hand up. or just a pencil in the air?
Madam Chair, I think probably just to support what Councillor Clinton has just raised, I was initially thinking that a recommendation would be the best way to put our foot forward, but I'm also acknowledge that that would then come to council as a resolution, and there's very little that they could do with a work program as part of a resolution. I think that to Councillor Clinton's point, it's important that this work program be considered as part of the formation and that there will be sufficient operational advice given to that structural formation, which this will be a part of. So I'm comfortable in the way it stands. Thank you.
Kia ora. And Member Ward, are you okay with that? Yeah, okay, awesome, great. Okay, no further comments or questions. I'll put the vote by division. Councillor Collard?
Yeah, in favour.
Councillor Clinton?
Aye.
Councillor Smith?
Support.
Councillor Besich?
Aye.
Member Ward? Support. Member Te Wake?
Tautoko.
And I was tautoko as well. Right, thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, great work program, team. Okay, now we're on to item 6.2, that the Regulatory Compliance Committee receive the report, update report, environmental services monitoring and compliance.
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'll second. Right. Rochelle, did you wish to speak to this before we take questions?
Madam Chair, outside of the graph data in the report, I have nothing further to add.
Okay.
Take any questions.
Awesome. Okay. My colleagues by teams, do you have any questions about the resource consent monitoring, district plan RFSs, abatement notices? Member Smith, Councillor Smith, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, firstly, Rochelle, thank you for the report, and I just want to acknowledge the work that's been done to catch up on the unmonitored resource consents. It's a space that I think we've learned over the last 3 years needed more and more attention, so it's really great to see that coming to life. I think just a little bit of feedback on the report. Going forward, it would be really great to have, I don't know, that might look like percentages, but I'm struggling to contextualise the information, probably more of a message of what we're not doing as opposed to what we are doing, just to understand what those trends are looking like and how we can track that so that we avoid getting back into the space of 1600 going forward, and we can support to trigger that early. So that was really just a piece of feedback. I didn't have any questions other than that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I've got member Councillor Clinton.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as Dean can tell you, sort of monitoring of consents is something I've taken an occasional interest in. We invest an enormous amount of time in processing consent applications, approving or denying them, setting conditions and so on. But then we don't tend to monitor them very well. And I acknowledge that's very much about resources. I know that we don't have a sufficient resource to proactively, to use that word, monitor very often. That more often, I think I'm correct in saying that we sort of tend to rely on complaints or people saying, hey, what's going on here? This is not what was in the consent. So I wonder if there's some way we can adjust this or amend this resolution to highlight the fact that it is an issue around resourcing. If we're serious about setting conditions on consents, then we should be monitoring them actively. But currently, we really haven't invested enough in that. And if I think I'm right on that, Dean might confirm or deny. But I do wonder if we ought not to highlight the fact that a big part of the problem is simply lack of resource to ensure that conditions that we place are actively monitored and complied with.
Yeah, Madam Chair, certainly is a challenge. So what Councillor Clinton has raised there is it's an ongoing as a committee knows, it is an ongoing challenge for us. And finding the optimal balance of resource, how many resource consent monitoring officers would we employ to deal with the backlog. There is another aspect that we have started looking at, and that is to look at the front end and how the conditions are set. Now, our planners do their work and they apply, they set conditions as part of consents with input from engineers and others. So we're mindful of the fact that we may need to be a little more focused at the front end to make sure that the conditions, when they are set, are reasonable and are manageable going forward, because we have found a few where we set conditions that then put us in a position of having to renegotiate around some of the, there may be an inevitability around that, but there's one case now at Kirikiri where we're dealing with a developer, and we need to be a little bit more circumspect around some consent conditions. So it's a combination, but the point is well made about resourcing. Rochelle may want to comment, because I don't honestly know how many. If we had a choice, a blank check to go and employ resource consent monitoring officers, how many would we have?
Versus how many we've got.
Madam Chair, I think I have put in the report where we had one dedicated resource consent monitoring officer, where we have a fixed term monitoring officer that had come in to do the backlog. But with the increase in resource consent applications, obviously the output of those, there's so many resource consents now that do need to continue monitoring. So it's something that I would like to have pushed as rather this fixed term role is we definitely need that permanent plus at least another in my mind. What we have done is with some recent changing within the monitoring team where the resource consent monitoring sits, is make, and they're already doing it and to a large extent, is really making them more multi-skilled, that they are monitoring resource consent. So, if someone's based up in Kaitaia and they're doing some work there, that they're actually able to monitor the resource consents at the same time as perhaps doing the bylaw and district plan. So we're trying to just get that multi-skilled level across the team as well. But certainly, with the huge number of applications that we've been getting, there's a huge number of resource consents at the end. So they all need to be monitored, and we do, much rather be proactive rather than reactive.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Prompting conversation, obviously, so that's triggered another question in my mind, and that's around the incoming district plan or the currently proposed district plan. Do we have an idea of what level of monitoring and enforcement we may be triggering with our proposed versus where we sit currently? Just in terms of what Rochelle has raised and Dean about front footing, how can we be better prepared by taking the opportunity that Councillor Clendon has raised to highlight to our CEO? Do we know what we're setting ourselves up for?
There's been a report on that to this committee, I think it was.
Yeah. Greg, without setting you up, Greg may want to have a go at answering that. It's a difficult question to answer because there's a certain amount of complexity around that, and Greg has covered some of this in workshops. But yeah, Madam Chair, maybe Greg would like to comment.
Thank you. It's a very good question, because we are bringing forward a new approach, more of an activities-based planning approach. So in theory, you should be creating an easier pathway for certain development to occur in particular locations, and for other development to know that they have to go through a more conservative pathway to get to an outcome. So in theory, that should lead to development that is permitted, being more straightforward, and people shouldn't have to get planning agents to help them through that process. Think development that is not conforming with that zoning framework may have to have the checks and balances associated with it, and therefore a monitoring regime accompanying that. So at the moment, as an effects-based plan, anything can happen anyway as long as your effects don't exceed the particular standards. And my thinking is that actually offers more of a high demand on monitoring processes, because you're trying to shape outcomes for non-conforming uses. Whereas the proposed plan is saying, hey, this is the place to go for these types of activities. These activities are not anticipated. We'll have to condition that appropriately. But between now and the time to get to a solid framework, it's still going to be a couple of years off because of the plan making process. But they're good questions to consider, and I'd suggest as we get through submissions and we're writing planners reports, we can certainly bring those types of issues to the table. There's a similar thing where we have to report on plan efficiency and effectiveness. Is the plan managing the things appropriately in a way that is the most efficient? And so minimising those knock-on processes such as monitoring would be something to consider as part of that efficiency and effectiveness review.
Thank you for that, Greg, and it'll be we'll get some early indication through the submission process of what some of those, things that might need to be monitored or may not end up needing to be monitored.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Anybody else on that item?
Madam Chair, just a point of clarity, was Councillor Clendon looking to raise an amendment today? He had signalled it, so just
Thank you. Yes, I actually just raised my hand for that reason, to suggest an additional line. The committee recommends a review of the monitoring resource to ensure we are meeting statutory obligation and public expectations.
happy to include that as the movement, Madam Chair.
Councillor Clendon, may I have that last portion, please, again?
Sure, statutory obligations and public expectations. So I'll move that as an amendment.
Councillor Clendon, could you just confirm who we're recommending to?
To council.
Good question. CEO, I guess. It's on his, it's not actually council's role, so yes, to CEO. Thank you. CEO, I had to think when I was saying it. So.
Well done. And are you happy with Councillor Smith and I just adding that to the current resolution?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, great. Cool.
Through the chair,
yes.
just on that second part of the proposed change to the resolution, should it not really be policy commitments? As policy commitments, the council has made through regulatory policy, i.e. bylaws, or policy it's made.
Councillor Clendon, did you catch that?
I'm not sure I understood it, no.
Clarity through the chair. Just on the recommendation, we have policy commitments we make through bylaws. So ensuring we're monitoring and effectively meeting those policy commitments we make through bylaws and policy making that we have. So monitoring of that is not happening at the moment. Example might be the next paper that's coming up. We've got a report that's coming up on dogs. So for the dog policy, we do have to do that through a statutory requirement. We don't have to have anything around that for other policy.
Madam Chair, just for clarity, sorry David, just to jump in. Roger, are you saying that perhaps it should read meeting statutory obligations, policy commitments and public expectations?
If that's where you want to go, I'm adding in an extra bit about policy.
Councillor Clendon, did you catch catch that? So I think that what Roger is clarifying is that it's not just around the building environment. There are other policies that he would like to make sure is being looked
Yeah, it's
into
broadening the
as
scope. I mean, we're talking specifically about resource consents here, but I always admire opportunism. So by all means, yeah, add another aspect to it.
well. Yep, so that those two words were meeting policy commitments, statutory obligations and public expectations.
So, Madam Chair, through the Chair, is it that the committee recommends that the CE undertake a review of the monitoring results?
Can you see that, Councillor Clinton?
Our review.
Yes, yeah, it could read, or either the CE undertakes or simply that the CE reviews. Yeah, undertakes actually, given what you've written there. CE undertake a review of. That'd be good.
CE to go before the
Takes
undertake.
a review.
Okay, so, and that the committee recommends the CE undertake a review of the monitoring resource to ensure we are meeting policy commitments, statutory obligations and public expectations. Awesome. I love that. Way to go. I think that's one of very few recommendations to council this committee's ever made. Sorry, Member Ward, you're all good?
Yes, I just want to
Yes, certainly.
that the policy commitments encompasses bylaws.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's got all this in
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
Madam Chair, that
Oh,
I think.
yes, Councillor Vucic.
Yeah, I thank David for that. That was on my mind prior, that we had, we weren't reviewing, we were talking about that before, everything we could. So I'm really pleased that David put that in there. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, vote by division. Everybody? Councillor Collard?
In favour.
Clinton?
Support.
Smith? Aye. Vucic?
Aye.
Member Ward? Member Te Wake?
Aye.
Thank you. Right, item 6.3. The recommendation is that the Regulatory Compliance Committee receive the annual report on dog control policy and practices 2021-2022. And Rochelle has some slides, but mover and a seconder, please.
I'm happy to move or second.
Vucic. Did Collard move?
Councillor Vucic moved that.
Okay.
Quite happy to second.
Oh, okay. Be a delay. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Rochelle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll wait for the slides to.
Oh, they're on your screen, though. Someone else can see them. Awesome. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to introduce you to the cover girl for this year. Her name is Stitch. She was adopted from Far North District Council in September last year. And the owner said she is so loving and is very much loved. We are blessed to have her. So I'd like to introduce Stitch.
Yay.
Okay, so this report is a requirement of the Dog Control Act, where all territorial authorities are required to report annually to the Department of Internal Affairs on specific areas of legislation and the administration of its policies and practices. And the information assists central government to assess national trends and developments. So just a summary of the report, there's been a total of 2,611 dog control RFSs received, 8,347 registered dogs, 199 infringements have been issued, one prosecution was initiated within the 2021 period. There are 171 menacing dogs classified in the district and 2 dangerous dogs classified, and there have been 337 dogs impounded. Okay. 65 dogs were rehomed by the Far North District Council Adopt a Dog Facebook page this year, or last year. 34% of impounded dogs were rehomed to rescue groups or adopted via the council website. And 107, 32% of dogs impounded at the shelter were euthanized due to either not being claimed by their owner and not being able to be suitable for rehoming. So I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Rochelle.
I'd also, sorry, Madam Chair, I'd also like to acknowledge an email that I was sent through this morning from the Watchdog group, which I do intend to answer in full.
Okay.
I understand that was sent to committee members.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Member Ward, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Oh, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rochelle, for this report. I think a trend that we've seen, and it's a good trend, is the increasing use of the VADE model, especially here. I know that we're quite limited with what we can and can't report, but I think going forward it would be quite helpful for the committee to get a better understanding somehow of the benefits of using that and how we can be learning there, especially, you know, I think that we've got a commitment to report at the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff side of things, but we're not so much talking about what we're doing in the beginning of the VADE process to work with people and encourage those good outcomes. So I guess in terms of the interest of telling the whole picture, going forward, if there are opportunities where we can be telling that whole story, that would be really useful, especially if we're talking about resourcing and things like that, and looking at where resourcing is best to be allocated and how we can work smarter in that space going forward. So that was really just a comment for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and it's a little bit along the lines of what we discussed at the agenda preview, making sure that you know, those great proactive things that are happening at the beginning of that VADE conversation are lifted up and the kōrero is out there publicly. Yeah, and you touch on it a little in the report and under community engagement, but did you want to mention, like give an update of some of the stuff that has happened recently? Because there was recently, I can't remember where it was.
Madam Chair, so some proactive work that we're currently doing in the registration space is around finding unknown dogs. There's a number of unknown dogs, so we're sort of looking for those. And within August alone, there were 155 dogs that have been found that haven't been registered before. So these are unknown dogs to council. And being the start of the registration year, a number of those people have come forward and registered their dogs, and it's also a good opportunity for the animal management officers to engage with those people with the unknown dogs in order to get them to work on getting them desexed, microchipped and everything like that. So once dog owners know that we know that the dogs are there, there is a correlation between the welfare of the dogs and that they stop straying and things like that, because they're aware that council knows that they are there. So, so that's some great work that the team's doing at the moment.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair, that the team's doing a great job in the dog space. I know that the dogs are very controversial and will probably continue to be controversial throughout the district, but it's an ongoing process of dealing with these cases, mostly in rural areas, which are very difficult to follow up on. A lot easier in urban areas to do door knocks and so on. So I really want to compliment the team. The other thing is the Ngākuri days have been very successful in the past, and something we'd look to do into the future, really just to promote desexing of dogs, registration, chipping, so on. And those have also been successful and they've made a difference. So it's a variety of things that we really need to do. And the rehoming aspect is really positive, either through violence animal rescue. We do our own rehoming through the website. That's been very successful too. So all round, a very good effort, I think.
Just to add to that, Madam Chair, the proactive work that we do within the community is more likely to, we're hopeful that we have less impounded dogs, but from those impounded dogs, the more bad dogs that we're impounding, and so that is likely to be, well, may not pass the temperament testers in order to be rehomed. So the more work we do in the community to keep good dogs at home in the right place that are all compliant and desexed, microchipped and registered, where we hope in the future is from all of that proactive work that we're doing with the community is that we have less dogs impounded full stop, but also from those impounded dogs that they're the bad dogs. So there's less likely to be an increase in the adoption of dogs from that.
Thank you, Rochelle. Councillor Collard, did you wish to ask a question or say something?
Yes, I did. Just reiterating what Dean has just said in terms of dogs being controversial. I noticed the number of RFSs at more than 50 per week, so that demonstrates a controversy, should I say. But that wasn't my question. My question is, we've got 8,347 dogs registered. There's also a number here of unregistered dogs at 10,917. But this week at a mayoral meet the candidates, there was a mayoral candidate that suggested that there was 50,000 unregistered dogs. And I wonder if there would be any element of truth, or is that mass exaggeration on behalf of the mayoral candidate?
Madam Chair, so within the report we have our known dogs, and from those the unregistered dogs, the 8,000 or so and the 10,000. So it's certainly coming up now to the end of this week. On the 8th of September we'll be following up on those known unregistered dogs, and many of those will possibly be dead or have moved from district, but that's a real focus that we need to look at. And then, as I mentioned before, the proactive work that we're doing around those unknown dogs to council, and that is an unknown figure. I would be very, very surprised if it was 50,000 as reported. In other councils that I have worked in, when we do the proactive work, and we call it not woof woof in some places where we're going around the different addresses and looking for those unknown dogs, but it's possibly another one of an unknown dog to what we are aware of, but I would be I would find that could there be a lot of dogs out there that we don't know about if there's another 50,000.
Thank you. Appreciate
it. Thank you, Councillor Collard. Just to take the speaking stick, I'm going to commend the community boards for also playing a role in the dog space, because they have been proactive in funding. There's been desexing applications, and up north there was the application for, unfortunately, controversial site, and also supporting, so there's Babylon's Animal Rescue and Canine Good Citizen that have benefited, which has meant that, dog training, better behaved people looking after dogs out there. Yeah. Anybody else? No? Okay. I'll put this paper to the vote. Collard. Councillor Collard.
In favour, sorry.
In favour? Thank you. Councillor Clendon.
Aye.
Councillor Smith. Aye. Councillor Vucic.
Aye.
Member Ward. Support. Member Te Waki.
Pūtoko pau te kaha.
Kia ora. That's me too. Here. Right. We are now on item 6.4. And the resolution is that the Regulatory Compliance Committee receive the report, Building Consent Authority and Building Compliance Update. I'm happy to move that. Rachel, did you want to second that? Awesome. And anybody have any questions on this report or comments? Anything you wish to say?
Madam Chair, apologies from Trent Blackman, he's unwell, so couldn't be with us today, but I think the report speaks for itself. The building team, building services, is in a very good place. These statistics and all the figures included there show that we are meeting our statutory requirements around 20 days, the average days to process consents, building consents that is, and also codes of compliance, all are very positive. So we're about to have another audit done by IANS next month, and we are expecting to see a good result from that. We have no major concerns. Audits always highlight things that we can learn from, and we expect to see a few things like that. But in the last few years, we've really come through. The building team's done extremely well and had a glowing report last time. So we expect to see something similar this time. We have an internal process with a quality manager who looks at all of our building processes and audits internally, and those are coming out. I'm pleased to say I've seen several internal audit results just recently that are very positive, and so it puts us in a very good place, I think, for the coming audit next month. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think the report shows that the building team, the numbers are slightly down on year and against the 4-year average, so that might be a trend that we just keep an eye on in terms of building work. The building industry is struggling with costs of materials and supply chain. I think that's starting to be addressed now nationally. But the numbers are still fairly significant, even though they're dropping slightly. We do expect that to continue, and if the resource consent numbers are anything to judge by, then into the future we're going to see, after the subdivision stage, we're going to see building work, continue into the future. So we think the next 2 years are going to be busy years, nevertheless, albeit at a slightly reduced level. Still busy, we think.
Okay, thank you for that, Dane. Do I have any questions from the committee on this paper? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that, Dean, because you hit my question on the head. I was going to ask about whether or not we had any concerns about an incoming bow wave. So just on the back of what you just talked about, do you feel confident that, knowing that will probably come, we're still geared for success, that we'll be able to cope with that, and it shouldn't put us in a bad space?
Yes, so the challenge for us in the consenting space, both building and resource consents, is recruitment. But I'm happy to say that in this last round of recruitment, Trent Blackman has indicated that he has some very good applicants, which is always nice to see. We have had vacancies in the inspectorate, building inspection side of things. And once those are filled, I think things should normalise. Where we don't have enough building inspectors, the days push out to something like 8, and normally builders don't like that much. 4 or less is if they book an inspection and they can get an inspection within 4 days, normally that's something they can live with. So we've been working very hard to, in spite of the vacancies, to make sure that the building inspection side is ticking over nicely. Part of the issue we had there was an administrative issue, because they are booked, inspections are booked, the people phone the contact centre, they make the booking. So we've made some improvements there in terms of how that booking is made, and then how the follow-up is done to complete the inspection. We have had situations, and it's an ongoing challenge for us. We are working with builders to make them aware that they shouldn't overbook, because what they do sometimes is they'll book, and then if they're not ready on that particular day, that sets us back, because the building inspector turns up, they're not ready, and they have to then set another inspection day. So that's wasted time on our side. So we encourage them to work with us to let us know as early as possible. If they aren't ready, then we book a new date, and that flexibility also in terms of them being ready ahead of time for us to be able to then link in with them and say, yes, we have a gap, we can actually do that for you on that particular day. So it's quite a few permutations there. We work very hard to make sure that side of things works well, because there has been criticism in the past, but we think it's working well. And we're getting the vacancies filled, which is, the applicants look good, so we hope to fill those vacancies. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Criticism at the beginning of the training, this was not as pretty a picture.
No.
So, yeah.
Come a long way, haven't you? So compliments to Trent and the team.
Absolutely, looking really positive going into this audit. Any other comments or questions on this report? Committee members? No? Okay, let's put that to the vote. Pollard?
In favour.
Cleandon?
In favour.
Smith? Support. Research?
Aye.
Member Ward? Thank you. Member Te Wake?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we're on to action sheet, which is probably not covered on that. Maybe move that, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you. Right. That's our meeting.
Madam Chair, just a quick cheeky comment to say last meeting of the triennium, and we've managed to put some things onto the action sheet, so well done.
Oh yes, I'll move that resolution. Thank you. Yeah, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Excuse me, I can fix that. We've got research and ward. Do I need to run through everybody, or? Probably should be consistent. Councillor Cleandon?
Sorry, yes. I couldn't hear that exchange you just had with Marlene.
Sorry, we're just going to go, yep, aye, but we thought we'd better stay consistent and do vote. Because
sure.
Half our committee's online. Thank you. And Smith, support, and research already said yes, and so did Member Ward. Member Te Wake, this is just to receive the action sheet, which is empty anyway.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Yep, thank you, Councillor Smith. This is our last regulatory and compliance committee meeting. We do get some action items on that sheet. Can I just thank everybody, Dean and your team. It's been a pleasure working with you on this committee, and my colleagues. I'll close with a karakia. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou araki o Ihukaraiti, tō mātou araki o me te aroha, me te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake. Amen. And a huge mihi to Malima, who has been just stellar in this role as our meeting support person. Thank you.
Thank you from us, Madam Chair. It's been a pleasure working with you and the rest of the members of this committee. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Close your meeting. Yes, please. Turn us on. Thank you, Casey.